The Wes Penra Papers. A Journey Through the Multiverse. The First Level of Learning. wespenry.com. Present and Future Challenges, PFC, Section. PFC Paper Number 5, Present and Future Earth Changes and Their True Causes. 1. Abstract. There is a lot of Earth changes right now, much more than has been the norm in modern history. We have seen an increase in earthquakes, tsunamis, tornadoes, flooding, and strange weather behavior in general, mostly out of the ordinary. Even people who usually don't specifically notice such things are starting to wonder what is going on. When comes to Earth changes, I have noticed that people could be put in these 3 categories. 1. Those who just go on with their lives, perhaps notice a few abnormalities happening, but think it's nothing unusual, not caring to look into it. These are the ones in oblivion and denial. This is the majority. 2. Those who notice it, have made some research and are quite alarmed and frightened about it. 3. Those who know many of the causes and reasons, but either have great confidence in that they will make it through, or at least are trying to do something constructive about it. These people are usually the ones who have a greater concept of existence than the average person. Many people have emailed me and asked me what is going to happen in 2012, and if it's going to be the end of the world or not. Some emails are fearful, while others are just inquiring. It's a complicated subject, but I am going to do my best in this paper to explain our main challenges and what may happen around 2012 and beyond. I am going to start with the more alarming challenges and end with the more positive ones. There are a few alien agendas as well which are to be counted in, but I will not bring these up them here, as they are already discussed in my earlier papers. The ones we shall discuss in this paper are more cosmological, astronomical, and astrophysical in nature. 2. When Earth nearly died, around 11,500 years ago. It's always hard for a species to accept that something catastrophic may happen within their own lifetime or the succeeding generation. Logically, we all know that catastrophes and Earth changes have happened numerous times throughout history. No one would deny that. It's quite different if someone says it may happen right here and now. Then, all of a sudden, we have a tendency to get into denial and even try to stop the doomsayer from speaking. We don't want to hear and just go on with our lives. Albeit, if we think about it, and have the understanding that we live many lifetimes at once only separated by linear time, we know that this has happened to us all before. Our immediate response could be fear, which is normal and quite appropriate for a while, but only the knowledge of the above can sort out who has more survival potentials than another. Sometimes physical preparation is not enough, but more of a secondary nature. One has to create a safe environment with energy coming from within. This is often the reason why some people always seem to be lucky, while others in a similar situation are not. It has very little to do with luck but the person's use of energy, wittingly or unwittingly. If we raise our own vibrations and become more aware of our wholeness, which can be summarized as our bio-mind plus information cloud, i.e. body/mind/soul, and have all apparent pieces of the wholeness vibrate together towards a common goal, in consciousness of what they are and work as one, we create a vibration that is free from fear and full of love and light. Not only will this state of consciousness help us individually, but it will also affect others around us. By developing ourselves, become more enlightened day by day, week by week, year by year, we are thus being the ultimate service to others by being examples and bring our vibration of higher consciousness into our environment. A few enlightened beings can save a whole city. Then, of course, one has to be realistic, too. In some factions of the New Age movement, people think they can literally take a bullet and they believe it won't hurt them. Ultimately, they are correct, but the odds are not that great. So, common sense and a big portion of energy work will be most helpful. This is very important to keep in mind when we face what is coming. The part that may not happen in our lifetime is still our responsibility, because it will happen to our children and grandchildren. Hence, it's our responsibility to remind them of who they are, that they are spirits in a bio-mind, and that they create their reality beginning with their thoughts and emotions. The earlier we do this in a person's life, the better. The reason for this is that the little kids are much more receptive than teenagers and adults due to that they have not yet been indoctrinated with false ideas from society and have their existence as pure spirit fresher in mind. It is known from studies that young children can easily perceive multidimensionality when taught to them. This is because it's natural for them. Catastrophes and disasters have been very common in Earth's history, some of them very devastating, like the extinction of the dinosaurs and the deluge. The latter, being much later in history, circa 9500 BC according to Sitchin, wiped out most life forms on Earth. The most essential geophysical effects experienced by Earth were 1. A massive rupturing of the crust, 2. A realignment of Earth axial configuration, 3. Elevation of new mountains, 4. A widespread realignment of sea and land, much of our planet's animal and plant life was annihilated, and 5. These changes were accompanied by a gigantic flood. Interesting is that the deluge, just like Sitchin suggests in his Earth Chronicle series, happened 11,500 years ago, which coincides with when Nibiru entered the solar system, 3 cycles ago. But not only Sitchin is suggesting that a planetary body was the cause of the flood. D.S. Allen and J.B. Dallaire, 2 established researchers, who wrote When the Earth Nearly Died, Compelling Evidence of a World Cataclysm 11,500 Years Ago, Gateway Books, 1995, 386 pp., came to a very similar conclusion, however without even mentioning Sitchin's previous extensive work on the subject. They are describing Marduk, Nibiru, the radiant visitor from interstellar space, spewing great jets of fire from time to time, and of its breakup of a major planetary neighbor of Mars, Tiamat, and its subsequent departure sunward with a great mass of the stricken planet's debris. There is compelling evidence that the flood was a direct consequence of Nibiru's crossing at that time. Other great catastrophes in the more distant past, like the extinction of the dinosaurs some 65 to 66 million years ago, have been lively debated as of what could have been the cause. Although the mainstream explanation for the sudden disappearance of the dinosaurs is currently that Earth was hit by a large meteor which changed Earth forever, which could be true, it could as well have been the passing of Nibiru, just the same. If so, the meteor theory is not so far-fetched, as chunks of a Nibiru moon has separated from its main body during passing and fell down on Earth, Mars, and our own moon, which is not our moon, by the way, but that's another story. Not all encounters with the incoming planet have been devastating, though, it depends on its slight changes in orbit, which sometimes has been natural, from what angle it enters the inner solar system, but it has also been due to aliens watching over their living library, helping us through the otherwise very devastating Nibiru crossings. How Earth has been saved from Nibiru's gravitational field as well from other major spatial events will be discussed later in this paper. Which brings us closer to the discussion what will happen this time when Nibiru pays a visit, some 60 to 100 years from now. 3. Planet X, Nibiru. The effects of the incoming subjects that have to do with catastrophes and threats to mankind, which can potentially instigate fear in the receiver, are the ones I always dread to write. I really have to force myself. Analytically I know that it has to be done, but I'd much rather stick to more uplifting writing. Still, if I ignored it, my attention would go on it constantly, understanding that people need to know, or I'll do them a disfavor. And remember while reading the following that we do have choices and that there are solutions to any problem. I will go over the ones I can think of in the solution papers, so I hope you'll stay with me until then. There was a time when I didn't think Nibiru is going to affect us in any greater sense, if it even exists at all. However, intense research has made me convinced that it really is quite an issue. It is not going to wipe out humanity, but its passing through our solar system is going to affect us to such a degree that many people will not survive. This may sound like fear-mongering to some, but I think it's more honest to share the truth with you, rather than suppress it, like they have done the media and in the higher echelons of society. If we face our real challenges, the ones that matter, for what they are, we can do our best to work in unison on a solution. If we are oblivious, we are going to be taken by surprise, and we will not like it then, wishing we would have known. The global elite certainly know at least some of what is ahead of us, and they are preparing. Many who have read books and articles by true and honest reporters have seen evidence of the elite building bunkers, and whistleblowers are coming out reporting that some of the higher-ranking elite members and their families are preparing to move underground to survive. Some may even hope to move off-planet with help from alien allies. Little do they understand that bunkers and underground facilities won't help them much when Mother Earth is shaking in her transition, in great pain in her efforts to give birth to a new world, while responding to the wounds and pain we are creating by sticking holes in her veins, oil extraction, cutting off her source of oxygen, exploitation of the rainforests, destroying her auras, the atmosphere, with pollution so that she loses her multidimensional connections, and by misusing negative energy, unwittingly but stupidly destroying nuclear power stations, doing nuclear bomb testing, and so much more. The list goes on, and we, the people, just let it happen. We may disagree to what is being done to Earth, but that doesn't do much good. And this is just what we humans are doing, and does not include outside forces. However, the reason I brought up the issues in the last paragraph is because the more negligent and brutal we are to Mother Earth, without whom we wouldn't be physically alive, the worse the karma we will bring in from outside. Some of these outside threats have natural causes and are just part of the cycles of the universe, but depending on how we are moving our energy here on Earth is directly equivalent to how well we will survive future events. We, as a human species, have a lot of energy work to do to help calming the forces of nature. With this said, let's return to Nibiru. According to Zecharia Sitchin and other researchers, Nibiru is on a 3,600 years orbit around our Sun. Every time this giant planet, 5 times the size of Earth, enters our solar system, the gravity pull is very significant and affects all the planets in one way or the other. It comes in from the south, at an angle, and will at its closest pass between Mars and Jupiter, figure 3. This, however, is close enough to create great Earth changes. At the time this will happen, we will see what appear to be 2 suns in the sky, Nibiru being one of them and our natural sun the other. The evidence of this planet being a part of our solar system and now on its way to hit us again after 3,600 years is overwhelming. Not only did Sitchin do a good job with documenting this from his translations of the Sumerian tablets, but if we look back in history, we can see that major Earth changes happened approximately every 3,600 years. This, of course, coincides exactly with Nibiru's cycle. Also, like Sitchin and other scholars of today say, Nibiru is inhabited by an advanced species of giants, in their own language called A.A.Me. See previous papers, who are to a large degree responsible for creating us, the modern Homo sapiens sapiens, the thinking man, from their own DNA. Now, how can a planet, which is supposedly many times larger than Earth, have intelligent life? That goes against everything we have learned in school. Until recently, one of the things Sitchin was criticized for was just that, how an advanced race could have developed on such a huge planet, which upon everything else spent most of its existence out in deep space, far away from any heated star? We have evidence that this is the case, nevertheless, which gives us indications of how little we still know, and how rigid we are in our thinking. Cosmologists and astrophysicists have, until recently, stubbornly compared everything we don't know anything about with what we know. If we can't wrap our heads around it, it's not true. The thinking amongst scientists has been that if Earth is a perfect life-bearing planet, we need to look for other planets that are very similar to our own. If a planet is not of Earth size or revolve around its sun, which has to be similar in density to our own, within a certain distance, it's out of the question that it can contain higher life forms. Science is still quite rigid about this in general, but lately a new way of thinking has started to emerge. Here is an excerpt from an article at space.com from May 10, 2011, titled How Rogue Alien Planets Could Host Extraterrestrial Life. Interstellar planets might either be rogue planets that were originally born around a star and were later cast out by gravitational tugs of war, or sub-brown dwarfs that formed alone in interstellar space. Scientists have suggested that interstellar planets could support life under or even on their surfaces. It has been speculated that Earth-like rogue planets could have very thick atmosphere that keeps them relatively warm, or moons of giant rogue planets could experience tidal heating and have oceans beneath their icy surface, said planetary scientist Heikki Vanhamäki at the Finnish Meteorological Institute in Helsinki 5. This is precisely the situation with Nibiru. When Sirius C turned nova, the A.A.Me survived by moving underground, living off the energy which was still emitting from Nibiru's core. Later on, when Aalelu, allegedly the first of their kind who visited Earth around 500,000 years ago and found gold in huge quantities on our planet, could they start mining for it and use it as a conductor for their atmosphere so that life could be supported and sustained on Nibiru's surface as well. Soon enough the inhabitants could re-establish themselves on the only giant continent existing on the Red Planet. These beings, who later became known as the Anunnaki, continued their mining for gold here on Earth and elsewhere in the solar system, and even in other star systems in the galaxy, as they were, and are, very capable of space travel. So, is the incoming planet going to affect us big time now in 2012? Not really. In that sense it is not part of the 2012 prophecies. Nibiru is not coming to its closest point to Earth until 60 to 100 years from now, but we are already feeling the effect from its gravity pull. This is partly why the abnormal Earth changes are taking place right now. Still, this is just a mild beginning of a natural cycle that humankind has been subjected to many, many times in the past and survived, albeit reduced in numbers. Not all Earth changes can be blamed on Nibiru, however. We are also aligning with the galactic center, with the perfect alignment happening by the end of 2012, something we will talk more about in a while. Some of them are also due to not-so-natural causes, like HAARP, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, 6 and other similar weather modification programs run by our own government to create earthquakes, tsunamis, and extreme weather changes in general for their own service-to-self purposes. HAARP, which main facilities are based in Alaska, was for long a secret government program, but after a while, the evidence that this program is really up and running became so obvious that the government is no longer denying it. Of course, in line with their standard operating procedure, they just ignore people's protests. The government has learned since long that protests are like empty barks in the wind. 3.1. A detailed description of what Nibiru looks like. Dr. A.R. Borden of LPGC, gives a detailed description of Nibiru in his essay, The Link, Chapter 8. Which I am directly going to quote here. A.A.Me is reportedly a rocky, watery planet some 4.8 times the size of Earth. It is also reportedly a much older planet than Earth, approximately 6.8 billion years old. Its solid core density is said to be 4.2 times that of Earth, with a considerably larger electromagnetic charge. Its crust, converted into miles, runs an average of 427 miles, within a spectrum of 149 at its minimum and 820 at its maximum. The magmatic core makes the planet to be still volcanically active, with some 200 volcanoes said to be harvested on the surface for heat, carbon dioxide, trace gases, and oxygen. The planetary orbit of A.A.Me. I render here is based on a privately calculated ephemeris, the position of the planet every decade since its initial identification in the early 1980s. He also includes a more detailed image of Nibiru's orbit and its passing through the solar system, which we shall discuss. Here we can see that Nibiru is coming in at a retrograde angle, not showing the 11 satellites accompanying it. These satellites, according to researcher James McCanney, MS, in his breathtaking, but very well-researched book, Surviving Planet X Passage, a supplement to the text Planet X Comets and Earth Changes, will behave just like comets, they too being rocky objects with a lot of frozen water, contrary to the actual planet, which has internal heat sources and therefore has liquid water. Nibiru itself will look and behave like a huge comet, followed by a trail, which is due to loss of water mass because of electromagnetic interaction and other reasons. 3.2 Nibiru's effects on Earth and the other planets in the solar system. Now that we have a grasp of how Nibiru will behave and look like, let's talk about what the direct effects will be on our planet and the solar system this time around. Dr. Borden is referring to McKenny as a bona fide source in this matter, and perhaps the only one who has described this in detail, in the above-mentioned book, and others in a series. I would highly recommend that you get it. I believe it's available for a symbolic $5. The reader should be aware that the book is written in an intention to shock, which is the author's way of saying, if it's not shocking, people will ignore it. I haven't been able to find any other sources, either, that are more to the point than McKenny. So let's see what he has to say about what most probably will happen. Electrical interaction as weather effects. Very unstable weather patterns will be the result. McKenny 2003, p.20. Results on Earth, water. Violent storms, with excessive lightning, wind, and water, with much of the water coming in from outer space. This will last for days, even weeks at the time. These will start occurring months, even years, before its passing. Secondary effects will be that the infrastructure will be destroyed to such a degree what we will not be able to repair the damage. McKenny 2003, p.20. Result on Earth, wind. Cyclones coming in groups will destroy whole towns, so those with houses will be left with only debris. Rains will be intense and last for a long time, creating mudslides, weakening the roadbeds. Rivers will flood, and people will be isolated, surrounded by rising water levels. Jet streams will also become erratic, with the consequence that one day will be extremely hot, while on the next day it may snow even in the tropics. McKenny 2003, p.21. Effects on life on Earth. Animals will die of starvation, and the water, which will be everywhere in abundance, will be undrinkable. Those who haven't made it to very high ground at this point will find it harder and harder to be able to do so, until they are unable to move. McKenny 2003, p.21. Chemicals other than water. Chemicals other than water such as ammonia, hydrocarbons, and other complex oils may start to influx from outer space as Earth becomes more electrically active and reacts to the increase in solar electrical activity caused by the approach of the large comet and its nucleus, Planet X. McKenny 2003, OPCIT p.21. If the comet's orbital path brings it so that Earth passes through its tail, the interactions will increase and we would see severe flooding and immense hurricanes with associated tornadoes and cyclones on both land and sea. The influx of hundreds of other chemicals would also occur. McKenny 2003, OPCIT p.22-23. Interplanetary electromagnetic interactions. Streaming of large, electrical discharges between planets and their moons, as between the planets themselves, will be clearly noticeable from Earth. Jupiter especially, with its large electrical interaction with the Sun, will seem to be throwing lightning bolts across the sky. The huge comet will likewise begin to discharge electrically to the other planets, and a huge trumpet-like call will ring through Earth's atmosphere as the searing electrical discharges interact with the upper atmosphere. Colorful auroras will light up even the daytime sky with finger-like dancing lights as the electrical discharges continually interact with the ionosphere. McKenny 2003, OPCIT p.21. Sharp whistling noises will be as music choreographed with the electrical light show in the heavens. The comet itself will appear as many colors, but through its middle will be an intense blue or purple neon-like light that will be visible in even the daytime sky. This is due to the extreme amounts of electrical currents flowing through the comet as it interacts with the Sun. If the comet is close to Earth, it may at times be mistaken for the Sun or Moon. McKenny 2003, OPCIT p.22. What it will look like. Historical records indicate that it could be reddish or bluish in color. McKenny 2003, OPCIT p.22. Magnetic field reversals. As Earth's magnetic field reverses more frequently, large sprays of high-energy atomic particles will pummel Earth's upper atmosphere, causing severe levels of radiation that would cause cancer in large numbers of survivors unless they were properly sheltered. These may also cause gene mutations in the species, causing new or altered animal or plant types to form in a fairly short time. McKenney 2003, OPCITP 22. Problems presented by companion objects. There could be one major complication, however. If, as in the past, the large comet is accompanied by companions, these might be large and of planet size themselves, and if they are perturbed away from the main comet nucleus, these too could become captured into the solar system. These then could remain to continually harass Earth as they wander through the solar system for possibly hundreds of years to follow. McKenney 2003, OPCITP 22. Temperature and weather. The Sun would be blotted out for days or even weeks as the huge comet passed by, and Earth's temperature would fall rapidly. Heavy rain would turn into snow and cover numerous parts of the globe, forming glaciers. Animals would be quick frozen into these glaciers and would be perfectly preserved for thousands of years to come. Our Moon would likewise flood and experience the same effects, although it does not have an atmosphere like Earth. McKenney 2003, OPCITP 23. Fire and brimstone. There could be the possibility of meteor streams coming into Earth's atmosphere and seeming like a rain of stars from the heavens. Mixed with the influx of hydrocarbons in the atmosphere, this would be the fire and brimstone spoken of by the ancients. McKenney 2003, OPCITP 23. Possible secondary effects. One example is that all the vermin, bugs, snakes, frogs, locusts, bats etc., would be forced to come to the surface and out of caves, and historical accounts say that they covered the earth as one of the plagues. The ancients also tell us of the water turning to blood, which must have been due to a chemical that polluted the waters. The vermin are forced out due to the electrical currents set up in the mantle of the earth. McKenney 2003, OPCITP 23. If the comet comes close enough to the earth to make a direct electrical attachment, then those in the immediate area where the snake-like electrical current would touch Earth would see a huge pillar of fire, as if a vast cyclone reaching into the heavens. The air would reek of ozone, and the pounding noise would scorch the earth and deafen those within hundreds of miles distance. McKenney 2003, p23. Furthermore, if the surface gravity of the nucleus of the planet is greater than that of Earth, then the comet could literally suck the atmosphere and oceans off of Earth, leaving it to look like our sister planet Mars. McKenney 2003, OPCITP 23. Gravitational effects. The final and most severe Earth changes would occur if the intruder passed close enough to Earth to cause gravitational effects. There has been a tremendous amount of incorrect information propagated on the internet stating that magnetic fields would couple and cause a pole shift. The real cause of the physical pole shift is caused when a large gravitational wave or impulse passes through the mantle of Earth and basically jerks it around the core beneath. The physical pole shift, as opposed to a magnetic pole shift, is where the north rotational pole of Earth is shifted southward and a previous southern area becomes the new north rotational pole. The south rotational pole is likewise shifted. In a previous pole shift, the old North Pole was somewhere just north of the state of Wisconsin, while the old South Pole was in what we now call the South Indian Ocean. The shift moved the tropical area of Siberia northwards in a matter of hours, flash freezing entire herds of tropical mastodons and woolly mammoths in their tracks while they were still standing on all 4 feet. Today we are discovering them thousands of years later with the meat as fresh as the day it froze. Tropical plants including delicate flowers were found undigested in the throats of these animals. McKenney 2003, OPCITP 24. During a mantle shift caused by gravitational impulse of the passing large comet nucleus, tremendous earthquakes develop and the Earth is recovering from these and adjusting for centuries to come. Volcanoes will become active and new fissures in the Earth's surface will bring forth new volcanoes where none existed previously. There is a second type of gravitational wave pole shift I call the precession pole shift. It is induced as Earth's spinning core processes in the gravitational field of a nearby passing large comet nucleus and is illustrated later in the text. The Earth's mantle rides over the core in a separate type of pole shift, and may move in a totally different direction. McKenney 2003, OPCITP 25. What is very clear from the above quotes is the resemblance with biblical and other prophecy. I would sincerely suggest that much of the biblical predictions, spelled out in the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel, have everything to do with the incoming Nibiru and its inhabitants. And it's all backed up by both known history, hidden, but now revealed, history, and myth. In my mind it makes it quite solid evidence. If we also take time and listen to our channeled friends from Cosmos, whom so patiently are working on putting the record straight after all the lies we've been subjected to, they are telling us the same thing. The reader may argue that McKenney had already made up his mind and therefore could use his own imagination to make it look like prophecy when describing the passing of this big planetary body, but if so, I again would advise the reader to get hold of the book and read it. The author is making very solid points and his arguments are very well researched. I would love to say that it's all fiction, but then I would mislead the reader. Again, McKenney's book is written with an intention to shock, by not holding back on facts, no matter how devastating they may sound. The reason for doing so is because he knows that most people need high voltage to be able to wake up from their daily busy lives and dramas. If you want to impinge, you'd better do it with all your might. In this case, I agree. After been asleep for so long, we need a high power jolt to focus our distracted and scattered attention units. Furthermore, he is of the opinion that only an uninformed society would succumb. If we know what is ahead of us, as a mass consciousness, there are no limits to what we can do. People in the worst situations are often the most inventive. This has been proven over and over again. Those who thought they would be powerless in a life and death situation suddenly find themselves unusually proactive. Survival is a very strong instinct. In the book, James McKenney is quite to the point describing what we need to do to prepare. The preparation will require not only preparing stores of goods to weather the situation, but it will require people to be settled in their new surroundings with a complete lifestyle change that has no dependencies on standard utilities or infrastructure of society. Those that make the break early will have the greatest chance of survival. Those that wait to the last minute will be left unable to cope with all that will have to be done. The stress levels will be severe in the worst case scenario, so being in the new surroundings and already adjusted will be of utmost importance. This is good advice, and the sooner we prepare, the better. Not only because we stand a better chance to survive in general, but knowing how the Western society in particular reacts to disasters, it would be a great idea if we're already settled and ready to go when things start changing drastically. It's discouraging to see what happens here in the United States and elsewhere in the Western world when disasters hit. I am thinking about Hurricane Katrina as a typical example. People grouped together in families and close fiends, when possible, and protected their territory. Looting was way too common and couldn't be kept under control. Of course, I can understand when people are starving that they need to grab what they can, but only because we are not helping each other across the domains of families and friends. I am also running a blog called, News from Behind the Scenes, http://battleofiath.wordpress.com, where I posted an article about which products would be the most possible ones that were going to be off the shelves in case of a catastrophe. Weapons, like guns and ammunition, was listed as item number 7. People often comment on the articles I've posted, and in this case, the majority of the people thought that guns should be number 1 on the list. What to get under these circumstances in order to be able to protect themselves, family, and property. This is very sad, in my opinion. It only shows how service to self and separated we are from each other. If a stranger passes by, we have a tendency to think of them as a potential looter, thief, rapist, or murderer, rather than a hungry soul wanting something to eat, and in such circumstance we could share what we have with this starving wanderer. So, instead we threaten the person at gunpoint and shoot if they are doing anything suspicious. Then compare this with what happened in Japan when the tsunami hit just recently, and the nuclear reactors started leaking. There was no looting reported whatsoever. Instead, people all over the catastrophe area helped each other out to the absolute best of their abilities and contributed with whatever skill they had to save as many people as possible. People were less concerned about starving than we would here in the West under the same circumstances. In Japan, people knew that if someone had something they needed, they would share. They actually even put out signs outside their houses, "We have water." Here is polarity, service to self versus service to others. If a worldwide catastrophe would hit today, who do you think would have the best survival potentials? The Japanese or the Americans? We have a lot, and I mean a lot, to learn from what happened in the aftermath of the Japan tsunami. Unfortunately, people in the Western societies have developed a culture very similar to that of the legendary Atlantis, which went from a highly spiritually evolved empire to a very service-to-self society. This was the main reason why so many from that culture was swept away in the flood, 11,500 years ago. Barbara Marcinak's Pleiadians have suggested for a very long time that we get away from machine technology as much as possible and start returning to nature. They even go as far as to say that Earth will eventually split into two worlds, one machine world, where people walk around like zombies, totally relying on technology to get through the day, and one world where people get together in communities and help each other out, living with nature and can thus evolve, in our bodies, together with Earth, the five elements, the ether being the fifth. Entities like the Pleiadians, whom are channeled through a human vehicle/bio-mind, have an ability to read a person's energy field and also that of the planet itself. They cannot totally predict the future, because we are making choices and change our minds constantly, but they can read the trend. And what I mentioned above is the trend, and I can see it. Personally, I know there will be a time, after I am finished with what I need to do, when I, too, will return to nature, just like I did years ago, until I decided to return to society because I knew I was ready to do what I came here to do. These papers are part of it. My suggestion is that we prove the Pleiadians wrong and work on creating one world, free from intrusive and controlling technology, which make us passive and non-responsive to outside events. Let's show them that we, as humanity, can do better than that and join together as one, similar to the movie Avatar, when the blue beings joined together with combined energies and intentions to make changes happen. We are capable of doing the same thing, and much, much more. We just have to grant ourselves that power and educate ourselves as to understand who we really are and what our combined purpose here on Earth is. Let's not sink deeper into oblivion. In his own blunt, but highly accurate way, McKenney is also elaborating on the resistance to having people prepare themselves. He says the following: the economic structures do not want to see people moving in this direction since a good deal of money is made by having people locked into dependency on the utilities and infrastructures of modern society. But before, during and after a passage, there will not be any use for any of these, as they will be rendered useless as the time of passage approaches. Again we can see the lack of higher consciousness in these so-called brilliant minds who run this planet. What good does their intelligence do, both to themselves and others, if it doesn't contribute to all our survival and evolution? Nothing but unsustainable power that will kick back at them 10 times harder than they themselves hit the ball. This is not some vicious wish on my part, but the application of the universal law called karma. Still, on a higher level of consciousness, we need to remember that we are here as part of a larger learning process, and there is no good or bad karma, only karma. It's there as a catalyst so we can learn from mistakes. We learn that there are consequences. Karma can be instant but also drawn out in linear time so that it hits back on future and past incarnations of self. From a higher perspective, where time as we know it here doesn't exist and everything happens instantaneously, learning lessons over the lines of time are stored in our information cloud, and more, to be used as a springboard towards more experiences. Although it looks like a person can get away with murder, he's really not. The longer it takes for karma to play out on a person, the more in denial he or she is, and the more forcefully it will hit. If we're evolved enough, we will heal both our past and future incarnation equally and help us gain spiritual power and understanding. Our lack of willingness to reach more enlightenment will also do the opposite, it will sicken instead of healing. Ultimately, nothing is better than the other, just different choices of experience. On page 27 in his book, McKenney is revealing that the choice of keeping the public ignorant about what is ahead was done long ago by the governments of the world to avoid panic. In the meantime, our economies are failing, and instead of letting much of it go and suggest that we all join together in attempts to survive, they are planning for more wars. And the ignorant citizens are over and again falling into the trap, unwittingly sacrificing their lives for nothing. It's childish to think that going down in a bunker or hide in underground facilities would provide a better shelter for elite members than would some people left on the surface. Yes, there will certainly be mass deaths, and because it seems like this time over, Nibiru will come closer to Earth than it did the last few passages, at least since the deluge. However, those who have a higher potential to survive are not those who hide under the surface, but those who migrate to high land, up the mountains. However, as McKenney puts it, a gravitational wave is sufficient to move waves of land and rock at speeds in excess of 1,000 miles per hour across the land. It can take deposited sandstone layers from the depths of the ocean and cast them 15,000 feet upwards as new mountain ranges form. Entire continents are altered and the northern polar caps move and begin to melt as new ones form at the new locations of the north and south rotational poles. This, of course, will affect current mountain ranges as well as the lowlands, but if we look at all the consequences of the incoming and add them together, we'll see that the mountains are probably the safest, especially when the rivers and oceans start to swallow land. But, and there is always a but, in case of severe earthquakes, the mountains may not be that safe either. You would need a Facebook account to see the following video, and if you do, you will find it very interesting. It clearly shows how NASA is deleting images so that the public will not discover that a huge planetary body is on its way to our solar system. http://www.facebook.com/video/video.php?v=134399359970261 comments. I know this sounds hopeless, but hang in there, because there are solutions and I will come to them in a while.